In a small town nestled in the heart of the Midwest, life moved at its own pace. The streets were lined with modest houses and everyone knew each other by name. It was the kind of place where people went about their days quietly, working hard, to make ends meet while cherishing the little joys that came along the way. Among these folks lived a woman who had learned to navigate life's challenges on her own terms. A single mom juggling responsibilities, dreams, and an unshakable spirit. This mother wasn't just raising her young son. She was also holding down 2 jobs to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. During the day, she worked as a waitress at a local diner, serving coffee and breakfast plates with a smile despite the long hours. At night, when most people were winding down, she cleaned offices, ensuring every desk was spotless for the next morning. Her days were packed, but somehow she managed to find time for the one thing that brought her peace: shooting sports. Growing up on a farm, this woman had been taught how to handle firearms by her father, a man who believed in teaching his children skills they could rely on no matter what life threw at them. He'd spent countless afternoons showing her how to hold a rifle steady, adjust for wind, and focus on the target without letting distractions get in the way. Those lessons weren't just about marksmanship. They were about patience, discipline, and trusting yourself even when things seemed impossible. After her father passed away, the old rifle he'd given her became more than just a tool. It was a connection to him, a reminder of the values he instilled in her. One Saturday morning, after dropping off her son at soccer practice, she decided to visit the local shooting range. It had been years since she last stepped foot there, but something inside her urged her to go. Maybe it was nostalgia, or maybe it was the need to reconnect with a part of herself she hadn't indulged in for too long. Either way, she grabbed the weathered rifle from the back of her closet, loaded it into her car, and drove to the range. When she arrived, the place was buzzing with activity. The annual open competition was happening that weekend, drawing skilled shooters from all over the state. Men and women clad in tactical gear and armed with cutting-edge rifles filled the space, exchanging tips and boasting about past victories. She blended into the background effortlessly, dressed in her usual outfit, faded jeans, a plain t-shirt, and scuffed boots. No one paid her much attention. To the seasoned competitors, she looked like just another curious visitor, someone who might try her hand at shooting for fun, but wouldn't pose any real challenge. As she set up near the edge of the range, a few heads turned briefly, but only out of mild curiosity. One man in particular couldn't help but notice her. He was the reigning champion of the competition, a brash, confident figure known for his sharp tongue and sharper aim. With his expensive equipment and flashy demeanor, he stood out among the crowd. When he saw her quietly preparing her rifle, he smirked and leaned over to his friends. "Looks like we've got a newbie," he said loud enough for those nearby to hear. His comment drew laughter, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she tightened her grip on the rifle, took a deep breath, and tuned out the noise around her. For her, this wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about honoring her father's memory and enjoying a moment of solitude doing something she loved. The dismissive glances and whispered jokes didn't bother her because she knew what mattered most: the bond between her and the rifle, the lessons her father had taught her, and the quiet confidence she carried within herself. As the qualifying rounds began, the range erupted into a flurry of action. Competitors adjusted their scopes, checked wind speeds, and fired shots with precision. Each hit was met with murmurs of approval, especially when the reigning champion nailed a particularly tricky target. But then, something unexpected happened. This unassuming woman stepped up to the line, raised her rifle, and fired her first shot. The bullet struck the center of the target with such accuracy that the entire range fell silent for a split second before erupting into whispers. "How did she do that?" someone muttered. Another competitor shook his head in disbelief. Even the reigning champion paused mid-conversation, his smirk fading slightly as he watched her reload and take another shot. This time the result was the same, a perfect bullseye. And then another. And another. Her calmness under pressure set her apart from the rest. While others fidgeted nervously or rushed their shots, she remained steady, almost meditative in her approach. Every movement was deliberate, every breath controlled. It was clear that she wasn't relying on luck or fancy equipment. This was raw skill honed over years of practice. As the rounds progressed, the murmurs grew louder. People started gathering behind her station, watching in awe as she continued to deliver flawless performance after flawless performance. Despite the growing attention, she stayed focused. For her, this wasn't about competing against others. It was about staying true to herself and embracing the joy of the sport. But deep down, she couldn't deny the satisfaction of knowing she was proving the doubters wrong, one shot at a time. As the initial shock of her first perfect shot began to settle among the crowd, the atmosphere at the shooting range shifted. What had started as mild curiosity quickly turned into a mix of admiration and disbelief. The reigning champion, who had initially dismissed her with a smirk, now found himself stealing glances in her direction. His friends nudged him, whispering comments about how this unknown woman was making waves right under his nose. But she wasn't paying attention to any of it. Her focus remained razor-sharp, locked onto the targets ahead. Each round brought new challenges. The organizers had set up increasingly difficult setups, targets placed farther away, moving ones that required split-second timing, and even some obscured by obstacles to test precision. For many competitors, these adjustments led to mistakes. Rifles clicked, bullets whizzed through the air, but not every shot landed where it needed to. Some shooters cursed under their breath, others adjusted their gear frantically, trying to compensate for errors. Yet through all of this chaos, the woman stood apart, not just because of her performance, but because of her composure. She didn't rush. She didn't panic when a target moved faster than expected or when the wind picked up unexpectedly. Instead, she took her time, breathing deeply and trusting her instincts. Every movement felt deliberate, like she was dancing with the rifle, rather than fighting against it. When she pulled the trigger, there was no hesitation. Each bullet sliced through the air with pinpoint accuracy, hitting its mark dead center. Spectators couldn't help but notice how effortlessly she seemed to navigate the course, her calm demeanor contrasting sharply with the tension gripping other competitors. By the end of the qualifying rounds, the murmurs had grown louder. People were openly discussing her technique, marveling at her consistency, and speculating about who she was. "I've never seen anyone shoot like that," one man said to his buddy while watching her reload. Another woman shook her head in amazement, saying, "She's got nerves of steel." Even seasoned participants, those who prided themselves on their years of experience, couldn't deny the skill she displayed. Despite the growing buzz around her, she remained humble. There was no grandstanding, no showboating after each successful shot. She simply nodded to herself, quietly acknowledging her work before moving on to the next challenge. This quiet confidence only added to the intrigue surrounding her. Who was this woman? Where had she learned to shoot like that? And why hadn't anyone heard of her before? The reigning champion, however, wasn't ready to concede anything. Not yet, anyway. He'd spent years building his reputation as the best sharpshooter in the region, and he wasn't about to let some newcomer steal the spotlight without a fight. During a brief break between rounds, he approached her station, leaning casually against a nearby table. His tone was casual, almost friendly, but there was an edge to his words. "Nice shooting," he said, flashing a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But let's see how you hold up under pressure." She glanced up at him, meeting his gaze steadily. Without missing a beat, she replied, "We'll see." Her response was simple, yet it carried weight. It wasn't defiant or arrogant. It was calm, measured, and confident. Something about her demeanor made him pause, if only for a moment. He straightened up, gave her a nod, and walked away, though his expression suggested he was still processing what had just happened. For her part, she didn't dwell on the encounter. She knew better than to let distractions get in her head. Shooting wasn't just about aiming and firing. It was about mental toughness, staying present, and blocking out everything else. So she returned to her routine, checking her equipment, adjusting her stance, and preparing herself mentally for whatever came next. Meanwhile, word of her performance spread beyond the range. Friends and family members of the competitors started calling and texting, eager to hear updates about the mysterious woman who was dominating the leaderboard. One person who received such a message was her son. Back home, he'd been eagerly awaiting news from the event. When his phone buzzed with a text from a friend saying, "Your mom is killing it," he nearly dropped what he was doing. Grinning, ear to ear, he ran to tell his friends at school, proudly declaring, "My mom is a real-life superhero." The pride in her son's voice meant more to her than any trophy ever could. Being a single parent wasn't easy, and there were days when she wondered if she was doing enough for him. But moments like this reminded her of why she kept pushing forward, to show him that strength comes in many forms and that hard work pays off, even if it doesn't always come with immediate recognition. Knowing that he believed in her gave her an extra boost of determination as she prepared for the final stages of the competition. As the day wore on, the pressure mounted. The remaining rounds would determine who advanced to the finals, and the stakes were higher than ever. Targets became smaller, distances longer, and conditions trickier. Competitors who had breezed through earlier rounds now struggled to keep up. Rifles jammed, shots missed their marks, and frustration bubbled over. But through it all, she stayed, steady, her rhythm unbroken. Her secret wasn't fancy gear or expensive training. It was something far simpler: trust. Trust in the lessons her father had taught her, trust in her own abilities, and trust in the process. Every shot she fired was a testament to years of practice, patience, and perseverance. And as the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the range, it became clear that she wasn't just holding her own, she was setting a new standard. By the time the qualifying rounds concluded, the leaderboard told the story everyone had been talking about. At the top, in bold letters, was her name. Not only had she secured a spot in the finals, but she had done so with scores that left even the most seasoned competitors shaking their heads in awe. The reigning champion, who had entered the competition as the heavy favorite, now found himself trailing behind her, a fact that didn't sit well with him. Still, she didn't let the rankings go to her head. For her, this journey wasn't about beating others, it was about proving something to herself. Growing up, she'd often felt overlooked, dismissed as someone whose potential didn't matter. Life as a single mom had reinforced that feeling, at times making her question whether she was capable of achieving big dreams while juggling everyday responsibilities. But here, standing among the best shooters in the state, she realized that none of those doubts defined her. What mattered was the effort she put in, the love she poured into everything she did, and the resilience she showed in the face of adversity. As she packed up her gear for the evening, she allowed herself a small smile. Tomorrow would bring the finals, and with it even greater challenges. But for now, she was content knowing she'd given it her all and inspired others along the way. The morning of the finals dawned crisp and clear, with a cool breeze sweeping through the shooting range. The atmosphere was electric, charged with anticipation. Spectators had arrived early, eager to see if the woman who had turned heads during the qualifying rounds could maintain her momentum. Whispers rippled through the crowd as people speculated about what might happen next. Some were rooting for her, inspired by her underdog story, while others remained skeptical, convinced that luck or beginner's chance had played a role in her success so far. For her part, she woke up feeling a mix of emotions: excitement, nerves, and a deep sense of gratitude. Her son, still beaming with pride from the previous day's events, gave her an enthusiastic pep talk over breakfast. "You've got this, Mom," he said, his voice brimming with confidence. "Just do what you always do." His unwavering belief in her was like fuel for her spirit, pushing away any lingering doubts. She hugged him tightly before heading out, reminding herself that no matter what happened today, she'd already proven something important, not just to others, but to herself. When she arrived at the range, the scene was bustling. Competitors milled about, adjusting their gear and mentally preparing for the challenges ahead. The reigning champion stood near the center of the action, surrounded by his usual group of admirers. He looked calm on the surface, but there was a flicker of unease in his eyes. Yesterday's results had shaken him more than he cared to admit, and he knew he couldn't afford to underestimate her again. As she passed by, he offered a curt nod, acknowledging her presence without saying a word. She returned the gesture, politely, then focused on setting up her station. The organizers had pulled out all the stops for the final round. Targets were placed farther away than ever before, some partially hidden behind barriers or rigged to move unpredictably. Wind machines added another layer of difficulty, simulating real-world conditions that would test even the most experienced marksmen. It was designed to push everyone to their limits, and it did exactly that. As the competition began, tension filled the air. Each competitor took turns stepping up to the line, firing shots that ranged from impressive to disappointing. Some struggled to adapt to the tougher setup, their frustration evident in muttered curses or frustrated sighs. Others managed to stay, composed, delivering solid performances despite the pressure. But all eyes kept drifting back to her. Every time she raised her rifle, the crowd seemed to hold its collective breath. Her first shot of the day was a masterclass in precision. The target, a small, fast-moving disc, zipped across the range, barely visible against the backdrop. Most shooters hesitated, trying to calculate the perfect moment to fire. Not her. She exhaled slowly, steadied her aim, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck true, sending the disc spinning off its track. A murmur of approval rippled through, the crowd followed by applause. Even the reigning champion couldn't hide his surprise, glancing over with a mix of admiration and irritation. But it wasn't just her accuracy that captivated the audience. It was her demeanor. While other competitors fidgeted nervously or rushed their shots, she moved with quiet assurance. Between rounds, she took deliberate pauses, closing her eyes briefly to center herself. It was almost meditative, the way she tuned out distractions and focused solely on the task at hand. Watching her, it became clear that this wasn't just about physical skill. It was about mental strength, discipline, and trust in her own abilities. As the rounds progressed, the competition grew fiercer. Scores were neck and neck, with only fractions of a point separating the top contenders. The reigning champion, determined not to let her overshadow him, delivered a series of flawless shots that drew cheers from his supporters. For a moment, it seemed like he might regain the upper hand, but she refused to be rattled. When it was her turn again, she stepped up to the line with the same calm determination that had defined her throughout the event. One particularly challenging setup involved 3 targets staggered at different distances, each requiring precise timing and adjustment. Many competitors faltered, hitting 1 or 2 but missing the third. When it was her turn, the crowd leaned forward, watching intently. She didn't hesitate. One shot after another rang out, each finding its mark with uncanny accuracy. By the time she lowered her rifle, the silence was deafening. Then the applause erupted, loud, sustained, and full of genuine admiration. Even the skeptics were won over. People who had initially dismissed her as a fluke now openly praised her skill. "She's incredible," one man remarked to his companion. "I've never seen anyone handle those kinds of conditions so well." Another woman nodded, adding, "It's not just her shooting, it's how calm she is, like nothing phases her." Behind the scenes, her son watched from the sidelines, clutching a homemade sign that read, "Go Mom." His face lit up every time she fired a successful shot, and he cheered louder than anyone else when the crowd applauded. Knowing he was there, cheering her on, gave her an extra boost of energy. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about showing him that hard work and perseverance could lead to extraordinary things. Despite her growing success, she remained humble. There was no gloating, no arrogance in her demeanor. Instead, she treated each round with the same respect and focus as the last. After completing a particularly difficult sequence, a fellow competitor approached her, extending a hand. "That was amazing," he said sincerely. "You're making us all look bad." She chuckled softly, shaking his hand. "We're all here to do our best," she replied. "That's what matters." The reigning champion, however, wasn't ready to concede defeat. During a brief break between rounds, he sought her out once more. This time, his tone was less mocking and more respectful. "You're good," he admitted, though it clearly pained him to say it. Better than I thought. She met his gaze evenly, offering a small smile. Thanks, she said simply. Let's see how it goes. By the time the final round approached, the stakes had never been higher. The leaderboard showed her narrowly leading with the champion close behind. Both competitors were neck and neck, and the outcome hinged on their performance in the last few shots. The tension was palpable, with spectators leaning forward in their seats, unwilling to miss a single moment. For her, this was the ultimate test, not just of her skill but of her resolve. Could she maintain her composure under such intense scrutiny? Could she rise above the pressure and deliver when it mattered most? As she stepped up to the line for her final shot, the entire range seemed to fall silent. All that remained was her, the rifle, and the distant target. She closed her eyes, took a slow, steady breath, and opened them again. In that moment, everything else faded away. The noise, the expectations, the weight of the competition. It was just her and the shot. The moment her final shot rang out, the entire shooting range seemed to freeze. The bullet sliced through the air with precision, finding its mark dead center on the target. For a split second, no one moved or spoke. Then, as if breaking free from a spell, the crowd erupted into cheers and applause so loud it echoed across the grounds. People clapped, whistled, and shouted their admiration, unable to contain their excitement. Even seasoned competitors who had been skeptical of her at first couldn't help but join in, tipping their hats in respect. Her performance hadn't just been good, it had been extraordinary. Every shot she fired during the finals was calculated, deliberate, and flawless. She didn't rely on flashy equipment or expensive gear. Instead, she trusted in years of practice, patience, and the lessons passed down to her by her father. Watching her handle the rifle with such ease and confidence felt like witnessing something rare, a perfect blend of skill, determination, and grace under pressure. The reigning champion stood nearby, his expression unreadable. He'd given it everything he had, firing round after round with incredible accuracy. But even he knew that today wasn't his day. As the scores were tallied and announced, it became clear she had not only won the competition but shattered the previous championship record. The scoreboard lit up with her name at the top, leaving no room for doubt about who the victor was. When the official results were confirmed, the crowd surged forward, eager to congratulate her. Strangers patted her on the back, shaking her hand, and offering words of praise. Incredible, one man said, shaking his head in disbelief. You've set a new standard. Another woman added, we'll be talking about this for years. Reporters and photographers jostled for position, cameras flashing as they captured the historic moment. Despite all the attention, she remained composed, smiling warmly, but humbly accepting the accolades. For her, this victory meant more than just a trophy or bragging rights. It was validation, not just of her abilities, but of her journey. Growing up, she'd often felt overlooked, dismissed as someone whose dreams and talents didn't matter. As a single mom working long hours to make ends meet, there were days when she wondered if she was enough for her son, for herself, for the world around her. But standing there, surrounded by people who now saw her for exactly who she was, she realized how far she'd come. This win wasn't just hers. It belonged to every person who had ever doubted themselves but kept going anyway. As the celebrations continued, the reigning champion approached her once more. This time, there was no trace of arrogance or mockery in his demeanor. Instead, he extended his hand with genuine respect. Congratulations, he said, his voice steady. You earned it. She accepted his handshake, nodding in acknowledgement. Thank you, she replied simply. It means a lot coming from you. His words carried weight, not because of who he was, but because of what they represented. In a world where egos often clashed and rivalries turned bitter, this moment of mutual respect stood out. It reminded everyone present that competition wasn't just about winning or losing, It was about growth, learning, and recognizing excellence when you saw it. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, she sat alone for a few quiet moments reflecting on everything that had happened. Her phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, family, and even strangers congratulating her on her achievement. Her son called first, his voice bursting with pride. "Mom, you did it," he exclaimed. "Everyone's talking about you. You're a superstar." She laughed softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. "I couldn't have done it without you cheering me on," she told him. "Your belief in me means everything." The support she received from her son and from others was overwhelming, but it also grounded her. Winning the competition didn't change who she was. It simply highlighted the strength and resilience she'd always possessed. She knew life wouldn't suddenly become easier because of this victory. There would still be bills to pay, late nights at work, and challenges to face. But what had shifted was her perspective. She now carried a renewed sense of confidence, knowing she could overcome obstacles if she stayed true to herself. The next morning, news of her triumph spread beyond the local community. Social media platforms buzzed with posts about the underdog mom who had stunned the shooting world. Local newspapers ran stories featuring photos of her holding the trophy, highlighting her humble beginnings and inspiring journey. Friends and acquaintances reached out, sharing how her story had motivated them to pursue their own passions despite fear or self-doubt. One message stood out among the rest. It came from a young woman who wrote, "I'm a single mom too, and sometimes I feel invisible, like my efforts don't matter. Seeing you succeed reminds me that we're capable of so much more than people expect. Thank you for showing us what's possible." Reading those words brought tears to her eyes. She hadn't entered the competition to inspire anyone. She'd done it for herself, for her love of shooting, and to honor her father's memory. Yet here she was, making a difference in ways she never imagined. That realization filled her with gratitude and purpose. Over the following weeks, invitations poured in from shooting clubs and competitions across the country. Organizers wanted her to participate in prestigious events, eager to see if she could replicate her success on bigger stages. While flattered, she carefully weighed her options. Her priority remained her son and ensuring she provided for him. She accepted a few invitations, using the prize money from the competition to ease some financial burdens and give him opportunities she'd always dreamed of offering. But she made it clear that family came first. Her newfound fame also opened doors to speak at community events, schools, and gatherings. Standing before audiences, she shared her story, not to boast about her accomplishments, but to encourage others to chase their dreams fearlessly. "Life will throw challenges your way," she often said, "but those challenges don't define you. What defines you is how you respond to them. Trust yourself, stay focused, and remember why you started." Each time she spoke, she saw nods of understanding, heard murmurs of agreement, and noticed the spark of hope in people's eyes. Her words resonated because they came from experience, from years of hard work, sacrifice, and perseverance. They weren't empty platitudes. They were truths she lived by every day. Months later, when her son proudly showed off his report card, pointing out the improvements he'd made in school, she realized the ripple effect of her actions. He'd taken her example to heart, applying the same dedication and discipline to his studies that she demonstrated on the shooting range. "You taught me that I can do anything if I put my mind to it," he told her one evening. "And I want to make you proud." Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged him tightly. "You already do," she whispered. "Every single day, looking back on everything, the early mornings, the late nights, the sacrifices, it all felt worth it." Winning the competition had been an incredible milestone, but the real victory lay in the connections she'd strengthened, the lives she'd touched, and the legacy she was building. She may have stepped onto the shooting range as an overlooked figure, but she walked away as a symbol of resilience, determination, and the power of believing in oneself. And as she tucked her son into bed that night, listening to his steady breathing, and knowing he felt safe and loved, she smiled. No trophy or title could compare to the joy of being exactly where she belonged, with the people who mattered most, living a life filled with purpose and love. In the months that followed her stunning victory at the shooting range, life began to change in ways both expected and unexpected. The attention she received didn't fade quickly. Instead, it seemed to grow as more people heard about her story. News outlets picked up on the narrative of the single mom who had defied expectations and shattered records, turning her into a local hero, and eventually, a national inspiration. Invitations poured in from all corners, talk shows wanting to feature her, organizations asking her to speak at events, and even companies offering sponsorships for future competitions. At first, the sudden spotlight felt overwhelming. She was used to living a quiet life focused on her son, her jobs, and her passions. Now cameras flashed in her face, reporters asked personal questions, and strangers approached her in public places just to shake her hand or thank her for being an inspiration. While flattering, it also brought challenges. Balancing her newfound responsibilities with her role as a mother required careful thought and planning. She knew she couldn't let fame distract her from what truly mattered: her family. Despite the whirlwind of activity, she stayed grounded by sticking to her routines. Mornings still started with making breakfast for her son before sending him off to school. Evenings were reserved for helping him with homework, cooking dinner, and spending quality time together. These moments reminded her why she worked so hard: to give him a stable, loving environment where he could thrive. Fame might have changed how others saw her, but it didn't alter the core values she lived by every day. One of the most meaningful opportunities came when she was invited to speak at a community center, hosting a workshop for single parents. Standing in front of a room filled with men and women who faced similar struggles, she shared her journey openly and honestly. "I'm not here to tell you that life is easy," she began, her voice steady and sincere. "It's not. Some days feel impossible, and there are times when you wonder if you're doing enough. But I've learned that strength doesn't mean never feeling tired or scared. It means finding a way to keep going anyway." Her words resonated deeply with this audience. Many nodded along, tears welling up in their eyes as they recognized pieces of their own stories in hers. After the session, several attendees lingered to talk to her personally. One woman hugged her tightly, saying, "Thank you for reminding me that I'm not alone." Another man, a father raising 2 daughters on his own, shook her hand and said, "You've given me hope. If you can do it, maybe I can too." These interactions reinforced something she'd always believed: we're stronger together. Her success wasn't just about individual achievement. It was about creating a sense of possibility for others. By sharing her story, she hoped to inspire people to believe in themselves, even when the odds seemed stacked against them. As word of her accomplishments spread, her son became a mini-celebrity in his own right. His classmates teased him playfully about having a superhero mom, while teachers praised him for his improved focus and determination in school. He wore these compliments proudly, often telling anyone who would listen, "My mom can do anything." Their bond grew even stronger during this time as they navigated the changes together, whether it was answering curious questions from neighbors or laughing over funny headlines about her win. They faced everything side by side, but the road wasn't without its bumps. Not everyone celebrated her success. A few critics dismissed her achievements, claiming she'd gotten lucky or benefited from media hype. Others accused her of prioritizing her hobby over her responsibilities as a parent. These comments stung, especially because they questioned her commitment to her son. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she setting the right example? Could she balance pursuing her passion with being the best mom she could be? She turned to her support system for guidance: her close friends, her extended family, and even some of the competitors she'd met during the tournament. They reminded her that criticism comes with visibility, and that staying true to herself was the best response. "People will always have opinions," one friend told her. "What matters is knowing you're doing your best, for yourself and for your boy." With that advice in mind, she chose to focus on what truly mattered. When negative comments surfaced online, she ignored them. Instead, She poured her energy into activities that brought joy and meaning to her life. She continued participating in select competitions, not to chase trophies but to honor her love for shooting and the legacy her father had left behind. Each event became another chance to connect with like-minded individuals who shared her passion. Over time, her son began to notice subtle changes in himself. Inspired by his mom's discipline and resilience, he started applying those same principles to his own life. At school, he tackled assignments with renewed enthusiasm, determined to make her proud. On the soccer field, he pushed himself harder than ever, refusing to give up even when the game got tough. One evening, after scoring his first goal of the season, he ran straight to her after the match, breathless and grinning. "Did you see that?" he asked excitedly. "I did it, Mom, just like you." She hugged him tightly, her heart swelling with pride. "You sure did," she replied, "and I couldn't be prouder of you." In that moment, she realized that her greatest accomplishment wasn't breaking records or earning accolades. It was seeing her son grow into a confident, capable young person who believed in his own potential. The ripple effects of her victory extended beyond her immediate circle. Women in her community, particularly single mothers, began reaching out to her for advice and encouragement. Some sought tips on managing work-life balance, while others simply needed someone to listen without judgment. She welcomed these conversations, knowing firsthand how isolating it could feel to juggle multiple roles without much support. Together, they formed an informal network of mutual aid and inspiration, lifting each other up during tough times. One memorable encounter happened at a grocery store. A young mother, holding a toddler in one arm and pushing a cart with the other, hesitated before approaching her. "Excuse me," the woman said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't want to bother you, but I just wanted to say thank you. Your story made me realize I can handle whatever comes my way, even when it feels impossible." Moved by the sincerity in the woman's words, she smiled warmly. "You're stronger than you think," she said. "We all are. Just take it one step at a time." By embracing her role as a source of inspiration, she discovered a deeper purpose. It wasn't about seeking recognition or accolades. It was about using her platform to uplift others, to remind them that they weren't alone in their struggles. Every kind word, every gesture of gratitude fueled her desire to keep giving back. As the year drew to a close, she reflected on everything that had transpired since that fateful day at the shooting range. Life hadn't become easier overnight. In fact, it had grown busier and more complex. But it had also become richer, fuller, and infinitely more meaningful. She had proven to herself that she was capable of achieving great things, not despite her circumstances, but because of them. And in doing so, she had inspired countless others to chase their dreams, no matter how daunting the journey might seem. Late one evening, as she sat on the porch watching the stars twinkle above, her son joined her, wrapping a blanket around his shoulders. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think I'll ever be as brave as you?" She looked at him, her heart swelling with love. "You already are," she replied. "Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about facing your fears and choosing to move forward anyway. And you do that every single day." They sat there together in comfortable silence, the world stretching out before them. The road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but she knew they'd face it together, with courage, determination, and an unshakable belief in the power of perseverance. As the years rolled on, life continued to evolve in ways that reflected the profound impact of her journey. The single mom who once stood unnoticed at the shooting range had become a symbol of hope and resilience for so many. Her story wasn't just about winning a competition anymore. It was about breaking barriers, challenging stereotypes, and showing others what could be achieved with grit and determination. People began to see her not as an underdog, but as a trailblazer, someone who redefined what strength looked like. Her son grew into a young man who carried himself with quiet confidence, mirroring the values she had instilled in him. He excelled in school, earned scholarships for his athletic abilities, and developed a strong sense of responsibility. Watching him succeed filled her with immense pride, knowing that her sacrifices hadn't been in vain. Every milestone he reached felt like a shared victory, a testament to their partnership through thick and thin. On his graduation day, when he gave a speech thanking her for being his biggest hero, she couldn't hold back the tears. It was a moment she would treasure forever, one that reminded her why she'd fought so hard all those years ago. But her influence extended far beyond her family. Through speaking engagements, community workshops, and mentorship programs, she touched countless lives. Women and men alike sought her guidance, eager to learn how she balanced work, parenting, and pursuing her passions. She never claimed to have all the answers. In fact, she often laughed and said, "I'm figuring it out as I go, just like everyone else." Yet, her honesty made her relatable. People appreciated her candor because it showed them that success wasn't about perfection. It was about perseverance. One of the most fulfilling aspects of her post-competition life was mentoring young people interested in shooting sports. When local clubs invited her to coach beginners, she jumped at the opportunity. Teaching kids and teenagers allowed her to pass on the lessons her father had taught her, lessons about patience, focus, and respect for the sport. She loved seeing the spark in their eyes when they hit their first bullseye or improved their technique after weeks of practice. For many of these students, she wasn't just a coach. She was a role model who proved that dreams were worth chasing, no matter where you came from. Of course, there were still challenges along the way. Fame brought its own set of complications, including managing expectations and dealing with occasional negativity. Some critics dismissed her achievements as fleeting, while others accused her of prioritizing personal ambitions over her responsibilities. But instead of letting these voices bring her down, she used them as motivation to stay humble and grounded. She surrounded herself with supportive friends and mentors who reminded her of her purpose, to inspire others and honor her father's legacy. Her relationship with the reigning champion from that fateful competition also evolved over time. Initially seen as rivals, they eventually formed a friendship built on mutual respect. They crossed paths at various events and even collaborated on initiatives aimed at promoting shooting sports among underserved communities. Together, they organized free training sessions and donated equipment to schools, ensuring that financial limitations wouldn't prevent talented individuals from participating. Their partnership became a powerful example of how competition can foster camaraderie rather than animosity. Years later, when her son joined the military, she couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions: pride, worry, and nostalgia. As he stood, in uniform ready to serve his country, she saw echoes of her father's teachings in his demeanor. Discipline, courage, and selflessness, qualities she had worked tirelessly to nurture in him, now defined his path forward. During his deployment, they exchanged letters regularly, each one filled with updates, encouragement, and love. In one letter, he wrote, "Mom, whenever things get tough, I think about how you handled everything on your own. You taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up every time." Those words meant the world to her. They validated everything she had endured and reinforced the importance of leading by example. Life hadn't always been fair, but she had chosen to face it head-on, refusing to let adversity define her. And now, watching her son embody those same principles, she realized that her legacy wasn't confined to trophies or headlines. It lived on in the people she inspired. The shooting range remained a special place for her, a sanctuary where she could reconnect with her roots and find peace. Even as she aged, she continued practicing regularly, cherishing the solitude and focus it provided. Sometimes, she brought her grandchildren along, teaching them the basics of marksmanship and sharing stories about her father. Seeing their faces light up with excitement reminded her of her own childhood, sitting beside him on the farm, learning the art of precision and patience. In retirement, she dedicated more time to writing and public speaking, using her platform to advocate for causes close to her heart. From supporting single-parent households to promoting access to recreational activities for underprivileged youth, she tackled issues with the same tenacity that had propelled her to victory years earlier. Her message remained consistent: Life will throw challenges your way, but you have the power to rise above them. Trust yourself, lean on your support system, and never stop believing in your potential. Decades after her historic win, she returned to the same shooting range where it all began. Now older and wiser, she walked slowly, savoring the memories etched into every corner of the space. The organizers greeted her warmly, inviting her to speak at a ceremony honoring past champions. As she stood before the crowd looking out at familiar faces and new ones alike, she smiled softly. "When I first came here," she began, her voice steady and full of emotion, "I didn't expect much. I just wanted to shoot, to remember my dad, and to do something I loved. What happened next surprised me. Not the trophy or the records, but the connections I made and the lives I touched. None of us knows how our actions might ripple outward, inspiring others in ways we can't imagine. All we can do is give our best, stay true to ourselves, and trust that our efforts matter." The applause that followed was heartfelt and thunderous, a fitting tribute to a woman who had transformed her struggles into triumphs. As she left the stage, a young girl approached her shyly, holding a notebook and pen. "Can I have your autograph?" she asked, her eyes wide with admiration. Smiling, she obliged, adding a few words of encouragement. "Believe in yourself. You're capable of amazing things." That moment encapsulated everything she had worked toward. Legacy wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about leaving the world better than you found it, one person at a time. And as she drove home that evening, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, she felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life had tested her in countless ways, but it had also rewarded her with love, purpose, and the chance to make a difference. Her story ended not with fanfare or fireworks, but with quiet contentment, the kind that comes from knowing you've lived authentically and touched lives along the way. She may have started as an overlooked figure at the shooting range, but she finished as a beacon of hope, proving that strength, resilience, and kindness can change the world, one shot at a time.